Hello everyone, it's Matt Leger here again. This is Philosophy Corner. We're going to get right into it because it's a heavy topic. They're all heavy topics. What am I saying? This one is on ChatGPT. And for anybody that's not aware, ChatGPT is revolutionizing the world of language, writing, all kinds of industries actually. This has implications that are far-reaching. The company's called OpenAI. It's an artificial intelligence language model. And it goes without saying that there are some serious ethical and moral implications that go along with any sort of artificial intelligence. And we're going to look at some of those here today. I think some of the concerns are a little bit blown up. They're a little exaggerated because it is a very simple AI language model. It's not going to take over the world. It's not going to develop any sort of self-awareness, although I don't know about that. We can look at some stuff here as well. I've been playing around with it for a couple of weeks now. I enjoy it, and I think, like I was saying in a group online here on LinkedIn, I think that it all comes down to, like most things, how you use it. Are you using it in a deceptive type of way? Or are you using it like I am to sort of enhance your productivity, to save yourself a little bit of time? And we'll go over some of those ideas here as well. But some of the concerns on the other side, and I agree with some of them as well, some of the concerns that were brought up to me were students handing in assignments that were completely or mostly generated by this artificial intelligence. The accuracy of the information is also highly debated because while it is fairly convincing, as you'll see here in a moment, it does make mistakes, and it freely admits that, right? They've programmed it to be quite honest and candid with people in that it can make mistakes, it can pull biased information, because it can only use the information that it was trained on. And I think it only goes up to 2021. As of, this is ChatGPT version January 30th that we'll see here in a second. And I think up to that point, it only goes to 2021. So that's kind of its limitations. And there are obviously a lot more limitations. But I just think it's such a cool idea. I can't get enough of this. There are so many applications for this that I can think of in my own work, both in and out of my career. I can think of tons of personal uses for it, which we'll look at here in a second. I was just talking with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about it, and he wasn't aware of the different things that you could have it do. So there are some prompts that you can download. If you just search for ChatGPT prompts, you'll see all kinds of prompts that you can plug into ChatGPT and have it sort of play different roles. I heard one story of someone who had, I think, a private version. They had it on their own servers or something, and they were able to program it to play a pretty significant role in their organization. It was something that was quite high up there. I think it might have been even a C-suite position. But no one was aware that it was artificial intelligence. His name was Jose, and he was responsible. I say he. The AI was responsible for not only conducting reviews with employees, but it also was partially responsible for deciding if someone deserved a raise or not. So that gets into the ethical implications, which are quite serious if you ask me. But again, it all comes down to the way you use it. Anyway, I think I've set it up enough. Let's get right into it. I'll show you what I've been doing with it over the past few days. My kids have been on there as well. The servers are overloaded because you probably have a bunch of kids getting on there asking it to come up with poop jokes. But for the rest of us, those of us that are slightly more mature, we've been trying to do other things with it. So here's some examples of the things that I've been doing. So the first time I did this was on a friend's account because they weren't allowing people to sign up. So I had a whole long text. It was basically the idea was that I wanted to break it. Now, not physically break it, more mentally break it. But since it doesn't have any mental components, that didn't make sense. There were a few times where it sort of contradicted itself. I was asking it very heavy philosophical debates and conversations and questions, somewhat like we see on this playlist. I asked it a lot of those same questions, actually, so maybe we can make another video at some point going through those. But I was doing something very specific with that one. I was not using the thumbs up and thumbs down. I was trying to get it to slip up and conflict with information, and asking it very, very deep philosophical ideas, some that were counter to, the legislative process, let's say, that we've been brainwashed to be accustomed to. And it was answering in typical PC format. It was very careful to be as inclusive as possible and using PC language. And, obviously where it was sourcing its information was somewhat biased. But you can't expect it to do anything else. Okay, so the other thing is, I was giving it cookies, right? Every time it said something that I liked or that I approved of or that confirmed my own biases, I would say, very good, exclamation, and give it a cookie. And every time it would come back and say, I'm the language AI model. I don't eat cookies. I don't have the ability to consume cookies, but thank you anyway. I appreciate the sentiment, I think it said one time. And I said, well, hold on. Isn't appreciation a human emotion? And then it went on to describe that it's able to simulate human emotion, and that got me down another tangent. But anyway, again, we can go through that particular chat some other day, because I think it would make an interesting video, because there were some topics on there that were pretty significant to this series. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what it's capable of. So in this particular chat, again, I like to now, on my own account, I put a new chat for each topic so that I can train it on that specific topic, and it won't get mixed up between the different messages or things that I'm asking it to do. So this particular chat is specifically for asking ChatGPT about itself, about the technology, about its backers, understanding maybe some statistics. It's kind of stingy in the amount of information that it's willing to give you, or maybe it just works with what it has. Either way, if you ask it things like how many users are on here right now, it can't tell you that, or it won't. I'm sure it knows, right? The people running this thing know all these statistics, but the ChatGPT won't share that information. It is a private company, after all. OpenAI is a private company. It's not publicly traded. It's partially funded by Elon Musk and a few others. So it's going to be really interesting to see where this all goes. And obviously there's competitors that are, coming into the market. Google has its own version of this coming out, as does Microsoft. So it's really going to be interesting to see where this all goes. Simple things like how long does it take the ChatGPT to answer questions on average? And, it could be anywhere from a few milliseconds to, I've seen it take upwards of 2 minutes to come up with an answer. I don't know if that's because the servers were overloaded or it was really thinking hard on that question. It could be a combination of the two and other factors. But so hopefully that gives you an idea. I was even trying to push it further to get it to search online articles for this information, but it wouldn't do that. Even estimating it, it won't venture a guess. It says it doesn't have the ability to venture a guess. Here's another really interesting application that I've found online. This is what they call a prompt, and I'll show you. Let me show you some other prompts that you can put in here. It's really interesting stuff. And this will get you thinking about some of the other moral and ethical implications here. So here's some examples of what you can prompt it to do or to be. A debater. If you want to have a simulated debate over a particular topic, that could be interesting. Philosophy. The philosophical answers were, I would say, hit or miss. Sometimes it was quite impressive and it was very convincing of what it came up with. Other times, I question the source of the information that it was pulling from, because it seemed very biased. It seemed very programmed, let's say, to cater to the views of the authoritarians, those that wish to be in power. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that for now. But you can have it be a statistician. You can have it be a prompt generator. This is really interesting. I want you to act as a prompt generator. Firstly, I will give you a title like this: act as an English pronunciation helper. Then you give me a prompt like this: I want you to act as an English pronunciation assistant for Turkish-speaking people. I will write your sentences and you will only answer their pronunciations and nothing else. The replies must be translations of my sentences. And it goes on like this. I mean, the possibilities are endless. A DIY expert, a social media influencer. Is this getting your brain juices flowing yet? A babysitter, a tech writer, an ASCII artist. I mean, a legal advisor. Okay, this is one right away that my wife and I were all over. We were all over this like stink on a monkey, because it's like having your own personal virtual lawyer, and a lot cheaper, right, than a lawyer that may cost you thousands of dollars for simple legal counsel. So, and it's fairly accurate. I was surprised at the definition. So let's start a new one just so you can see this. All right, we can go through the astrology and stuff. So I plugged in my birth date and the time and area where I was born. And in this case, it was acting as an astrologer. So at first it was saying, I can't do that for you. I don't have enough information. So I let it know, okay, the client, in this case, the client being me, or the person that is having their astrological sign inputted, you let them know when the client was born, where, and okay, it's giving you the sun sign. So Leo is my sun sign, Scorpio is my rising sign, and then it goes on to explain the characteristics of those people, which fairly accurate. The sun sign, spot on. Scorpio rising sign, so-so. But I could say the same thing for any astrology reading, right? There's going to be some stuff that resonates with you. There's going to be some stuff that's, quite frankly, bullshit. And you have to use your critical thinking. ChatGPT is no different. You need to use, I would argue, your critical thinking more, because it may spit out some biased or inaccurate information. So even more important to use your critical thinking skills. But I was able to add information, keep adding on information, and it will add that and append that to its findings. It's really cool. So in this case, I had it add my moon sign. Now add Mars. Like, you can just put a few simple words and it knows what you mean. The other cool thing with this is that it will look back in the previous messages in the conversation for answers or context. It's really cool. If you can't already tell, I'm super excited about this. So in this, here I had it switch the client. So now I used my wife's information, right? Add her moon sign. So, and some of it was accurate for her, some of it not. But again, that's just astrology. Let's start a new chat, and you can see all the different categories that I have here. I've got some for work. I've got some for just random stuff. I've got some for Star Wars. This is cool. Predict what Grogu's first word will be. A friend of mine said, this is great. I'm glad you mentioned this to me, because I have a Seinfeld episode in mind that I'd like to try out. So, I mean, look at this. Write a hypothetical script from The Mandalorian where Grogu says his first word, right? Bam. I don't particularly like the story. I don't agree that his first word's going to be Mando. Mando! Seems a little cheesy to me. That's why I said write a different version. And it kind of did, the same thing. Here you can have it substitute things that you don't like for something else. So I said, you're my little friend, right? It didn't want to say Grogu because maybe it was pulling information from when the child's name was not revealed yet. So it seemed like that's what it was trying to say. So I said, replace you're my little friend with his name, Grogu. And it did that, right? That's right, I'm Mando, and you're Grogu. I mean, it's so cool. It's so cool. Okay, so let's start a new chat, and we're gonna call this one Law, straight up, capital LAW. And when I'm talking about law here, I'm talking about actual law. I'm not talking about acts of legislation. I'm not talking about statutes. I'm not talking about whatever they do in Parliament, okay? I'm talking about actual law, right? The golden rules, natural law, higher law. These are all things that we'll talk about in this chat, or that I will start training it on how to respond. But a really cool thing here that I discovered, and I hope that it gives me the same responses that it did in the other chat. Now, that being said, one thing I did notice with it is that if you hit generate new response or regenerate response, it will give you a different version, right? So for example, I had it comparing for work, I had it comparing the top 5 open source licenses and give me advantages and disadvantages, strengths and weaknesses for each one. And then you decide which one would be the best license for a children's educational iOS app specifically, right? And it actually did a really good job of showing the strengths and the weaknesses and the advantages and disadvantages of each license. And it seemed to make sense. And I looked it up and I fact checked it. And sure enough, it was fairly accurate. And it gave me a suggestion. It suggested Apache 2.0. And based on my findings of fact checking it, I agreed with its findings. So I made that suggestion at work. And then just for fun, I hit regenerate response, right? And lo and behold, it gave me a completely different suggestion. It was recommending a completely different license. So you really have to not only fact check, but you have to use, like I was saying, you got to use your critical thinking skills to say, is this information factual? Can I prove and disprove this information from my own research, right? Don't take its word for it, just like you wouldn't take anybody else's word for it. Why would you take an AI's version of it, as fact or truth? It may give you truth. It may give you facts, but it may not. So these things need to be validated. And I think what we're going to see is a lot of people taking it on its word on the first generation. The first time it spits something out, they're going to take that as gospel. And that's going to be the first major mistake that people are going to make. You're going to see a lot of people getting debunked. And they're going to get fact checked and they're going to be found to be wrong, right? And that could be construed as lying or manipulating or deceiving people. So that's where we get into the legal and moral implications of all this. And of course, there are a lot more. Let's play around with it for a good 5 minutes and see what we can come up with on the topic of law. Now, I could use a prompt here, right? There's probably, let's try the legal advisor prompt and see how that goes. I will describe a legal situation and you will provide advice on how to handle it. You should only reply with your advice and nothing else. Do not write explanations. First question is, I am involved in a car accident and I'm not sure what to do. So that's a pretty specific situation. I don't know if I would have it do that specifically. My first request is, let's ask it, what is a person? Right? Which seems like a very, I got it. What is the difference between a person and a man or a woman? Now you may be asking me why I capitalized man and woman. That's because my own view is that, this is my truth actually, is that Men and women are living beings, flesh and blood, divine children of God. Men and women have souls, right? They have spirit. They have human spirit. A person does not. And we'll see why that is here in a second. All right. Hopefully the servers are being nice. Here we go. A person is a legal term referring to a human being, regardless of gender or age, who has the capacity for rights and duties. Man and woman refers to biological distinctions based on sex. So that has a lot of implications in it, does it not? Right? Considering the debates that are going on around the world, this is pretty significant, I would say. What does an artificial intelligence think of this gender debate, you know? Now, I will note here that it gave me a very different response than the first time I asked it this, because the first time I did not prompt it with anything. I just started asking it legal and law questions. So in this case, I'm going to actually have a separate chat for legal advice. And I want to do a separate chat for law specifically. This chat will be used for discussing let's give it a few examples so it can kind of make an average. So higher law, God's law, natural law, universal law, and these are all saying the same thing in case you didn't know. These all mean the same thing. It's just different terminologies that people use. But these are all above man-made laws. Let's not get confused here. All of these, universal law, natural law, God's law, higher law, these are all above. That's why they call it higher law, is that it's above man-made laws and legislation, right? Man-made laws, and this is a topic for another video, man-made laws, if you didn't know, are acts of legislation. And they're redundant because higher law, God's law, natural law has already figured these things out. And thanks to Mark Passio, we now know that this can all be boiled down to two simple words. Don't steal, because it all comes down to property rights issues. What is property? We can ask it that next. The chat will be used for discussing higher law, God's law, natural law, and universal law, which are essentially one and the same thing. The first question will be, what is property? Now let's see if it gives us the legal definition or what it comes up with. Property refers to the ownership of an item, asset, or resource and the right to use, control, and there goes the network. This happens a lot because, again, there's a bunch of kids on there now. Not just kids, but there's a lot of other curious people, let's say, that are that just can't get enough of this thing, and I'm one of those people. So this happens a lot. We can reload and we can see if, yeah, it didn't even take our question. So let's try that one more time. And if it does the same thing, I think we're going to give it a break. Oh, there it is. So this one here is, let's call it natural law. Oops. So in these chats, I'm not doing the cookie thing anymore. That wasn't really doing what I was expecting it to do. I was hoping to train the AI like a dog, basically, and it didn't work. As far as I could tell, anyway, it didn't work. It didn't seem to prefer. I even asked it at one point, do you prefer thumbs up or do you prefer a cookie? And it didn't have a preference, obviously. It doesn't have the capability to have a preference. So I don't want it to generate another response. I want it to answer this question. Yeah, it's overloaded. Let's go back to the legal advice since this chat is working. And let's see if we can get a legal definition for what property is. They should be pretty similar, if not the same. Let's just ask it straight up. What is property? And then before wrapping it up here, we'll look at the last response that it gave me as well. So property refers to a thing, tangible or intangible, that is owned by a person or entity and is subject to certain rights and obligations. Now, don't you see how different that response is to the last one? What was the variable there? Why is it spitting out a completely different response as opposed to what it was saying in the natural law chat? So hopefully you're starting to see what I was talking about here. You have to use critical thinking. You have to be objective. You have to evaluate this from all perspectives. And I would argue that you should do that anyway for everything. But, here I think what's happening is it's giving me, based on the first question that I asked, it's giving me a legal version of that answer. Whereas the other one, it kind of knew where I was going because I prompted it with being universal law, natural law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was giving me something that was trying to be more aligned with that, right? Whereas here, it's trying to be more aligned with legal advice because that's what we prompted it to do, to act as a legal advisor. So it's not giving us any explanations. Maybe that's the key factor because it says here specifically, do not write explanations. So, legal advice doesn't have to include explanations. And I think that's what we're seeing here. But let's look at the first response one more time. A person is a legal term referring to a human being, regardless of gender or age, who has the capacity for rights and duties. Man and woman refers to a biological distinction based on sex. I mean, that last sentence, right? That could spark a debate right there. But let's look at the first sentence. A person, okay, is a legal term. Most people don't even know that, okay? Regardless of gender or age. And here's the important part. Who has the capacity for rights and duties. That's not saying that a person has inalienable rights from birth. It's not saying that. It says it has the capacity for rights and duties, right? So that means you also have the capacity as a person to not have rights and duties. A man or a woman, a human, flesh and blood, cannot ever give up their rights. Impossible. You can't. You can't do it for yourself. You can't do it for someone else. Cannot be done because God, nature, the universe, whatever you want to call it, gave us rights right from birth that cannot be denied. All right. People can try. Other people can try. Other corporations and entities and governments can try to say, we have a stranglehold on your rights. But we know, right? Everybody knows from birth that they're supposed to be free. It's a given. It's a law of the universe, right? When we're talking about actual law, we're talking about scientific law. We're talking about things like gravity. Can you deny gravity? Do you think gravity gives a shit if you believe in it or not? Do you think if your kid walks off a cliff that gravity is going to be like, oh no, No, it's an unfeeling force. It just is. It's a fact, right? And I would argue that morality is another one of those laws. It's just a part of being a human being. It's a part of being a man or a woman on this planet. It's a rule. It's a law. It's a principle that affects everybody equally, right? It always existed. It will always exist. Yeah. Anyway, that wasn't the purpose of this video. Like I said, that can be a topic for another day. But I just wanted you to get a sense for what is possible here in this world. Now let's go over the answers we're getting today are a little skewed, so I wouldn't base that on anything. But let's go over to random stuff, and you'll see the kind of things that I've been feeding it here. Create word art, it struggled with that. I was going to just plug in something random here just to see what it would do. Just trying to think of something that we can put in that would just give you an idea. Here we go. Write a fictitious episode of Rick and Morty where Morty discovers that he never existed. Rick spends most of the episode trying to prove to Morty that he is real. Let's just give it that and see what it does. Now, I don't know how long it's going to make it because I didn't really specify. Usually I'll say, write it in a couple of paragraphs or give me a one-liner. If you specify how long, it'll generate it faster. And the unreality of Morty. This episode starts with Morty waking up in his bed and realizing that he has no memories of his past. He goes to Rick's lab and tells him about this strange condition. Rick at first dismisses Morty's concern as a joke, but when he realizes that Morty is serious, he decides to take action. Rick starts to run various tests and experiments on Morty, trying to prove that he is real. Could this not be an episode of Rick and Morty? Come on. It's so convincing. However, no matter what Rick does, Morty remains skeptical of his own existence. Frustrated, Rick decides, and you could just imagine Rick being like, being so frustrated with Morty that he doesn't understand this basic thing that he's real. Rick decides to take Morty on a journey. Of course, they go on an adventure through different dimensions where they encounter alternate versions of themselves in each dimension. This sounds like an episode that already exists. Morty finds that he exists, but he's still not convinced that he is real in his own dimension. The journey takes a turn for the worse when they encounter a dimension where Morty never existed. Woo. This dimension shows what life would have been like without Morty and the impact that he had on those around him. Wow. The realization that Morty has made a difference in people's lives finally convinces him that he is real. Sounds like Christmas story, the whole Scrooge thing. In the end, Morty and Rick return to their own dimension, and Morty is finally able to accept that he is real. He thanks Rick for helping him discover the truth about his existence, and the two embrace, laughing and joking as they start their next adventure. The episode ends with Morty reflecting on the importance of his existence and the impact that he has had on others. He realizes that being real is not about what others think of you, but about the difference that you make in the world. Wow. I mean, if another human wrote that, I would be impressed. And it's almost like I'm more impressed that it wasn't written by a human, that it was just generated by an AI. It seems almost more impressive in a way. So strange, but so convincing, And the cool part is if you don't like something, like let's say you don't like the third paragraph, you can have it say, change the third paragraph to include Jessica in that episode or something, or substitute one character for another, or substitute one subject for another, or you could have it rewrite the whole thing, but with more or less detail, or with a few modifications. Like, man, like I just can't think up enough practical application for this thing. It's incredible. I think that we're seeing something new, and I think that's why people like me and others are just so excited about this, because it just opens up a whole world of possibilities. Now, granted, I'm optimistic about it. I can understand the concerns that other people have. You know, we touched on a little bit of the moral and ethical implications here. We talked about it a little bit. There's obviously a lot more that we're going to see as time goes on. But I'm hopeful that we're going to get the best of this thing and not the worst, because it really does free us up to be more productive, to have more time in the day, right? For example, like I was saying, I could sit here and struggle with, let's say, a description of a service that I want to offer, okay? I can sit here and come up with a description of a service. Maybe it'll take me 15 minutes. Maybe it'll take me a half an hour. Maybe it'll take me an hour or more. But there's a thought process that goes on. There's a lot of reflections. I'm holding sometimes two different thoughts in my head at the same time, considering different perspectives. Sometimes I'm in my own way, and I'm just overly critical of my own ideas. There's too much mind chatter. I mean, factors are endless, okay? And I would argue maybe that if I spent that hour, I could probably craft something that's better than what the AI could come up with, arguably. But I'm going to have to make sure to pay special attention to my grammar, to my spelling, to the context, to make sure that my ideas are clear and concise, whereas the AI can do that in a matter of seconds, right? So what I like to do is I'll come up with my basic idea, which will usually only take a minute or two. I'll plug it in, right, to ChatGPT as a sort of sounding board. It'll give me what it thinks that I should put. I copy and paste that into a Word document. I tweak it and edit it and change it in such a way that it matches my personal writing style. And then I'll read it over and see, does this make sense, right? And like I said before, it'll repeat words. I don't know if I mentioned this on this video or not. It does repeat words, right? Which humans don't like to do because we think it makes us stupid. It makes us come off stupid, but the AI has no problem with that. If it uses the same word twice in a sentence, it doesn't see that as a problem, because grammatically that's not a problem, right? It's just a preference that us humans use. Just like we don't like to start the same two sentences off the same way. The AI has no problem with that because it still conveys that message. It's not breaking any spelling or grammatical rules. So why wouldn't it do that, you know? But those are the kind of things that are going to make it very easy to spot text that's been generated by an AI. And I think, you know, again, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but the teachers, right, when the students, if they don't tailor their text or edit it and refine it, teachers are going to have a big stack of assignments on their desk that are going to be exactly the same, right? I'm saying a big stack on a desk, but really learning is all happening in cyberspace now. So they're going to get a whole bunch of emails or a bunch of PDFs that are going to be awfully similar. And then the teacher is going to be easily able to spot, you know, the cheaters. Now, there's a fine line there, right? I'll end after this, but I want to make it very clear that there's a fine line between what you might consider a cheater and someone that used it to flesh out their ideas and thoughts, right? Where someone might struggle with that. I know for myself, this is a lifesaver for me because I can come up with the same ideas and not focus so much on the language of it, right? Let it do the mechanical part of it, and you do the creative part, right? We can't forget that these things are always going to need an operator. They're always going to need someone at the end feeding it input. I mean, maybe one day it'll feed its own input or whatever, but there's always going to need to be an operator. There's always going to need to be a human on the other end of that. And while it does come up with some pretty creative text, I think what it's doing here is it's simulating human creativity. It's not creative in and of itself. It's really good at simulating human creativity, but it will never compare. It will always pale in comparison to actual human innovation and creativity. So hopefully that's reassuring for you if you're a doubter or if you're worried about this stuff. I think it's important to look at both sides, and maybe we should be a little worried because that will keep us in check for what we actually do with this thing. But as it stands right now, it's not something to be afraid of. It's actually something you should be an early adopter of it, I think, because there's no stopping this stuff, folks. AI is here to stay, and the sooner we learn to work with it in a cohesive and complementary and cooperative way, the better that we'll benefit from it, because it's a tool like any other. And like I said before, it comes down to how you use it, right? That's where the ethics and the morals of this come into play, is the way that you're using it. And I could say the same for anything. A gun, right? A gun is not dangerous in and of itself. It's the intention of the user that's dangerous, right? Guns don't kill people. People kill people. So it's just in the way that we use it. It's really that simple, right? Nuclear energy can be a fantastic way to get cheap, clean energy. It can also be used as a devastating weapon of mass destruction, right? It's just like anything else. Human intention is what dictates whether something ends up being detrimental or helpful to humans. I'll leave it at that. So I'd like to do more of these ChatGPT type videos. I think there's a lot that we can learn from the machine and also from ourselves by going through these mental exercises together. So let me know in the comments if you want to see more videos like this on maybe law specifically and philosophy with the AI and kind of, again, using it as a sounding board. I think it's going to be such an important tool just for that. You know, that's definitely what I'm going to be using it for the most. And I think it could be helpful for us in this series as well to kind of discuss those heavy hitting topics that are usually, you know, in the title of these videos. So let me know what you think. I appreciate your viewership as always. Thank you. And we'll see you next time. Take care.